We're taught that family is everything, that blood means loyalty, that no matter what happens, you always stay. So when someone decides to walk away from their own family, it can feel unthinkable, cold, maybe even wrong. But what if that distance wasn't betrayal? What if it was actually survival? What if the real question isn't why someone left, but how much they had to endure before they finally did? Behind every story of family cutoff, there's often a long history of quiet compromises, emotional erosion, and invisible wounds. It's not about rebellion or selfishness. Sometimes it's about a person's nervous system finally choosing peace over pain for the very first time. If this resonates with you, know you're not alone. When we hear someone has cut off contact with their family, our minds often jump to conclusions. We might think it was an impulsive act, a decision made in a moment of anger or bitterness, as if overnight they just decided to walk away. But the reality is almost always more complex. Creating distance is rarely a sudden, dramatic gesture. Instead, it's usually the final, quiet step in a long and painful negotiation between self-preservation and a sense of obligation. Most people who choose to step back have spent years trying to stay. They've tried everything. They've lowered their expectations time and time again. They've softened their boundaries, hoping things would change. They've found ways to rationalize harmful behavior and have silently absorbed discomfort, telling themselves it's just how things are. But our bodies remember what our minds try to forget. Our nervous system keeps a silent score of all those moments that dismissed feelings. The repeated boundary violations, the subtle jabs that don't quite feel like a crisis, but also never truly heal. Over time, the body learns a fundamental truth that the mind can resist. Being close to these people feels unsafe. From a psychological standpoint, this isn't about avoiding problems. It's about regulating your own nervous system. When you're in an environment that constantly triggers your stress responses, putting distance between yourself and the source of that stress becomes the most logical way to find stability again. Your system isn't trying to punish anyone, simply trying to survive without being in a constant state of threat, tension, or emotional drain. There's a deeper philosophical side to this as well. Society often treats family bonds as sacred, as if they re-exempt from the normal rules of consent and mutual respect that we expect in other relationships. But the truth is, no relationship, no matter how it began, can be healthy if safety is missing. Loyalty without protection is just self-betrayal. Enduring mistreatment without setting limits is just self-neglect. So when someone finally makes the difficult choice to separate, it's rarely about rejecting their family. It's about reclaiming their own right to exist without having to be on guard all the time. It's the moment a person finally decides that peace is under something they have to earn through endless suffering, but something they are inherently worthy of and allowed to protect. Sometimes creating distance ISNT, an act of abandonment at all its, the very first act of self-respect. Have you ever felt caught between staying loyal to your family and protecting your own peace? It's a tough spot, and if you're there, know that what you're feeling is completely normal. Cutting ties with family is never a simple decision. It's an internal battle between two incredibly powerful instincts. One instinct pulls you toward loyalty, tradition, and the belief that family bonds should be unbreakable. The other pulls you toward safety, your own independence, and psychological survival. For a lot of people, these two forces are at war inside them for years before they ever make a change. Culturally, we're taught that family is forever. We're expected to forgive, to tolerate, and to keep up the appearance of a happy, unified family, no matter what it costs us personally. These ideas can create a deep sense of guilt, even when we know a relationship is hurting us. You can logically understand that a situation is damaging, but still feel like a bad person for wanting to step away. Your mind is telling you to protect yourself, but your heart feels torn by duty. This creates a constant state of tension. Every phone call, every family gathering becomes a stressful negotiation. Try to set boundaries, they get ignored, and you're left feeling exhausted and defeated. It's not about choosing between loving someone and rejecting them. It's about choosing between your own emotional stability and slowly letting yourself be worn down. And because our society praises loyalty, the immense personal cost of staying in a toxic dynamic often goes completely unseen by anyone else. There's also a profound sense of grief in this process. Letting go isn't just about the people. It's about letting go of the hope that things will ever change. It's giving up the dream that one day the relationship will be safe, nurturing, and everything you wished it could be. Sometimes that hope is what keeps us stuck more than anything else. Walking away can feel like finally admitting a deep loss you've been carrying in silence for a very long time. This brings up a bigger question. What does loyalty really mean if it demands you continuously sacrifice your own well-being? Does loyalty lose its meaning when it pushes past your emotional and mental limits? When it comes down to a choice between loyalty and survival, your body will eventually choose the side that allows you to breathe again. Remember, taking care of yourself is not selfish. It's necessary. By the time someone finally creates distance, the story rarely contains one dramatic breaking point. What usually exists instead is accumulation. Small moments that felt manageable on their own begin to stack quietly over years. A boundary dismissed, a vulnerability minimized, a promise forgotten. None of it looks catastrophic in isolation, which is exactly why it lasts so long. Psychologically, humans are wired to normalize familiar discomfort. When emotional friction becomes routine, the nervous system adapts rather than protests. People learn to tolerate what once felt wrong, to explain away patterns that slowly drain trust and safety. The danger isn't the intensity of any single incident, it sets the slow erosion of internal stability. This accumulation creates a kind of invisible fatigue. Each interaction carries the weight of unresolved memory. The person may appear calm externally, yet internally they're managing layers of disappointment, guardedness, and quiet resentment. Explosive anger, something more subtle and corrosive, emotional depletion. Over time, the relationship stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like maintenance. Energy is spent anticipating reactions, filtering language, bracing for familiar outcomes. The nervous system begins associating contact with vigilance rather than comfort. Even neutral moments carry background tension because history never fully resets. Philosophically, this challenges the way we define harm. We often measure damage by visible intensity rather than cumulative impact. But the psyche doesn't track events the way logic does. It tracks patterns. Repetition shapes expectation. Expectation shapes emotional safety. Eventually, a threshold is crossed not in drama, but in clarity. The person recognizes that staying requires continuous self-compromise, and leaving offers the first chance at internal quiet. Not peace yet, just space. Sometimes the deepest wounds are loud, they re the ones that taught you to slowly disappear. When distance finally creates space, something unfamiliar happens. The nervous system begins to settle. Thoughts slow down. The constant background tension that once felt normal starts to lift, revealing how much energy had been spent simply managing proximity. This is often the first moment a person realizes how deeply the relationship shaped their inner world. Psychologically, separation creates room for autonomy to emerge. Without constant emotional pressure, the mind can begin exploring preferences that were previously suppressed or overridden. Choices become quieter, less reactive. Values start forming internally rather than being negotiated externally. For the first time, the person can hear their own instincts without interference. This phase can feel disorienting. When identity has long been shaped in response to someone else's expectations, freedom doesn't immediately feel liberating. It can feel empty, even frightening. There is no familiar tension to orient around, no emotional weather to anticipate. The silence forces a new kind of responsibility. Deciding who to become when survival is no longer the organizing principle. Philosophically, this is the shift from reactive existence to authored existence. The self stops revolving around defense and begins moving toward intention, not perfection, not certainty, but agency. The individual starts experimenting with boundaries, expression, and self-trust, in small, often fragile ways, no spoken without apology. Rest taken without justification, desires named without fear of consequence. Autonomy is not the absence of connection, it's the presence of choice. And when choice returns, identity slowly reorganizes around authenticity rather than endurance. Freedom doesn't arrive loudly, it arrives quietly. when the nervous system finally realizes it is no longer under negotiation. Even when separation brings relief, it rarely brings clean closure. There is often grief layered beneath the calm, not just for the people themselves, but for the version of family that was hoped for but never fully existed. Humans don't simply attach to reality. They attach to potential, to imagined futures, to the idea that repair is always possible if patience lasts long enough. Psychologically, this creates a complicated mourning process. The loss isn't socially recognized, which means there are no rituals, no collective language, no permission to openly grieve. Friends may assume distance equals empowerment. Outsiders may expect emotional freedom to arrive immediately. But internally, the nervous system is still untangling years of attachment patterns and unmet longing. There's also ambiguity in the grief. The people are still alive. The door isn't always completely closed. Memory remains accessible. This keeps the emotional system in a strange in-between state, neither fully detached nor fully connected. Relief and sadness coexist. Stability and longing overlap. The mind understands the necessity of the decision, while the heart still reaches for what was never safely available. Philosophically, this reveals something uncomfortable about human attachment. We don't only mourn what we had, we mourn what we were never given. The absence itself becomes a presence. Letting go of hope can feel more painful than letting go of contact. Many people underestimate this stage because it doesn't look dramatic. It looks quiet, functional, responsible. But internally, it carries the slow work of recalibrating expectations about love, safety, and belonging. Distance can protect the nervous system, but it cannot instantly heal the longing it leaves behind. Some losses don't resolve, they simply soften with time. After separation, many people discovered that the hardest part isn't the absence of family, it's the way the outside world responds to that absence. Society carries a deeply rooted belief that family bonds are sacred, unconditional, and morally protected. When someone violates that expectation, even quietly, they often encounter confusion, judgment, or subtle distancing. The story becomes simplified. Something must be wrong with the person who left. Psychologically, this creates a secondary layer of isolation. The individual not only carries the private complexity of their decision, but also the social pressure to justify it. Explaining years of emotional erosion in a few sentences is nearly impossible. The nuance gets lost. The pain becomes invisible again, just in a different form. Many learn to stop explaining altogether, choosing silence over repeated misunderstanding. This reinforces an old pattern. The person becomes self-contained once more, managing emotional weight internally rather than risking misinterpretation. Even in new relationships, there may be hesitation to disclose family history, not out of shame, but out of exhaustion. Being misunderstood requires energy they no longer want to spend. Philosophically, this reveals how much society prefers simple narratives over uncomfortable complexity. We want clean heroes and villains, clear loyalty and betrayal. But human relationships rarely fit that structure. Sometimes the healthiest decision looks wrong from the outside because its logic lives inside the nervous system, not in social convention. True healing often requires finding environments that tolerate ambiguity, where personal boundaries are respected, even when they challenge tradition. Without that, recovery becomes a private process carried quietly. Not every act of distance is abandonment. Some are acts of survival that the world hasn't learned how to recognize yet.